This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. The first of all, to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so on whatever app or website you are listening to this on whatever device you might be listening to this on your phone, on your laptop, or maybe even on your watch. Again, please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. It'll take you about 2 seconds, and we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast. You would want to subscribe to the podcast so you get those alerts and those notifications on that device, your phone, laptop, watch, so you know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast here at the GSMC Sports Podcast team. Again, you want to subscribe to the podcast so you get those alerts and notifications, and you can be one of the first people to listen to a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast when we release it. Again, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, as well as follow us on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over on social media, we can really talk about anything you guys want. Again, over on social media, we can talk about sports, we can talk about the show, the content, we can talk about really anything, the Sunday night game, the Monday night game, whatever game's going on during that time. Again, if you want to connect with us more, and we'd love to reach out and connect with you guys more as well, on social media is where we can primarily do that. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would love that if you would follow us on all of those great platforms. And finally, don't forget to also leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. We would really appreciate it, and it would give us a big boost of confidence knowing that you guys are enjoying the content and discussion points that we are discussing here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. So again, if you could subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, we would really appreciate that. Again, I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have an absolutely fantastic show for you all today. It's absolutely packed. Later on in the episode, of course, at the very end of the show, I'm going to be giving you my game day picks. This episode will be released on Sunday, and you'll be seeing my game day picks, everything week 9/10 of the NFL, depending on how much your team has played. I'm going to give you my game picks for each and every game, both on Sunday and Monday, at the very end of the episode. Also, before that, I want to be giving you my top 10 NFL teams heading into this week. We've officially reached the halfway point for all teams. So at least every single team in the NFL has at least played 8 games, half of their season. So I want to give you my top 10 NFL teams, and it looks a lot different than how it did maybe at the beginning of the year, and even a lot different than how it looked through a quarter of the way through the season. My top 10 NFL teams, that'll be coming on later on in the show. Also later on in the show, I do want to talk about some major NFL storylines. Is Tampa Bay still a Super Bowl contending team? I'll be giving you the answer to that question. And who will be the best rookie quarterback long term? Herbert, Burrow, or Tua Tagovailoa? Who do I want for the distant and long future out of all of those guys? That'll come later on in this episode as well. And of course, we'll be getting into everything Russell Westbrook rumors. He seems to be the first superstar on the trade block, potentially, with the NBA lifting its trade restrictions tomorrow. When you're listening to this, Monday around noon is when trades will officially be finalized and announced. So hopefully we'll get some big trades coming through this NBA weekend. It's also the NBA draft on Wednesday as well. We have a packed week of sports And we'll get into all of that good stuff. But we are going to start off with a trade in the NBA that hasn't been officially finalized or announced yet because, of course, like I just said, it cannot be announced until tomorrow at noon. But according to Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams, they have pretty much been, everything that can be done has been done for this trade. And it's looking like that these, It should in theory be done as soon as tomorrow at Monday, and it looks like it's going to be announced. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, the Los Angeles Lakers are in advanced talks with the Oklahoma City Thunder on trading for guard Dennis Schroeder. Deal expected to include OKC acquiring Los Angeles pick at number 28 for Wednesday's draft, so pick number 28 on Wednesday's draft, and apparently Danny Green to make the money work is what this trade appears to be, sort of finalized. And again, the next tweet following that was Schroeder to the Lakers is well on course to be completed on Monday, sources tell ESPN. Rival teams in pursuit of the OKC guard have started to move on to other targets. The Lakers will land an impactful, versatile guard in pursuit of their franchise's title defense. Now, I just want to get right into this because I think this is an absolutely fantastic trade for the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, they're the 2020 NBA champions. They beat the Miami Heat in 6 games in the bubble. They come back, and everyone was talking about how all these other teams are going to improve, and myself included, how the Clippers must find a way to improve. They must find a true, real point guard, and they have a new head coach in Ty Lue. How, the Rockets need to improve, how the Jazz need to improve, how the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, all these teams need to improve to get to the Los Angeles Lakers. But the first team out of all of the teams to make a trade, a big one in fact, to improve their team is the LA Lakers, and I'm really, really proud of the Lakers, and I really, really love this trade for the LA Lakers for a couple of reasons. One, I am not a person who believes in running it back as a sports team or as a sports franchise. There are rare times where that works. You have to have an absolute dominant dynasty in order for that to work. You look back on teams like Golden State and maybe those Miami Heat teams. But even those teams didn't necessarily run it back with the exact same roster. They would always find little ways to improve. I mean, in Golden State's case, big ways to improve by adding Kevin Durant. Or for Miami, when they added Ray Allen in 2012/2013. I know that's not on the same level as adding Kevin Durant, but that was just a huge move for them at the time. The LA Lakers are not just making a splash in the hopes of their title defense, boosting that bench or boosting that core or, getting more rebounding or just getting another shooter. Dennis Schroeder is a legitimate player in this league, and in my opinion, he should have won Sixth Man of the Year last year. So, of course, last year for the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that going into the year had a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs, ended up being, I believe, a top 5-6 seed in the Western Conference. Now, Chris Paul will get a ton of credit for that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will get a ton of credit for that, and their coach at the time, Billy Donovan, who's now the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, will also get a ton of credit for that, and they all deserve that credit. But what they really, really, really also needed was what Dennis Schroeder was providing for them off the bench. He was providing for them 20 points per game off the bench. That, goes up with numbers such as Lou Williams, who has dominated and owned the Sixth Man of the Year award the past couple of seasons, and Montrezl Harrell, who won it last season. So for the LA Lakers to add a guy like Dennis Schroeder is bigger than I think people think. And while there's going to be a ton of awesome moves this offseason, wherever Russell Westbrook lands, potentially the Knicks or Hornets, which I will talk about later, potentially James Harden on the move too. Could he be going to Brooklyn, Miami, some of these other teams as well, the Clippers potentially. Of course, there's going to be a ton of other moves. Danilo Gallinari, who, again, another Oklahoma City player, could be moved. Victor Oladipo, it's still unclear if he's being moved or not. Bradley Beal, of course. A ton of players could and will be moved eventually. Chris Paul, during this NBA trading, sort of frenzy pre- and post-draft and pre- and post-free agency. But I think, honestly, maybe the most underrated move might be this move, and it might have already happened. Dennis Schroeder, I don't know what his exact role is going to be for the Lakers because it can be a couple of different things. LeBron James is obviously not the point guard, type body, but he's been playing point guard for the LA Lakers, last season, and he was the, if you consider LeBron James a point guard, of course, he was the best point guard in the league last year. Dennis Schroeder is a combo guard, but I think he leans on the side of point guard. Now, is he going to continue his role, maybe what he had in Oklahoma City? In LA, is he going to be coming off the bench and providing those bench scoring points, or is he going to be starting alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis and just having an absolute elite starting five? If I am Frank Vogel, if I'm LeBron James, if I'm Rob Pelinka, First of all, this trade's an absolute win. You're giving up the 28th overall pick, which in this draft, due to the COVID era, the college basketball season didn't really even end last year. There wasn't a true combine, true interview process, right? Everything was different. So this draft class, more than maybe any other draft class, I don't know about NBA history, but maybe at least, the last 15, 20 years, is a complete crapshoot. It's, we don't even have a consensus number one overall pick, unlike we've had in years past. Some people will tell you LaMelo Ball. Some people will tell you James Wiseman. Some people will tell you Anthony Edwards. And not just some people, but I think the entire NBA isn't even, confirmed on who they believe should be the number one overall pick. I think depending on who would have the number one overall pick, would be the guy selected, right? If a team needed a point guard, they'd probably take, LaMelo. It's been reported if Charlotte can trade up to number one, they want Wiseman. There's been some teams that want the kid from Israel as well. So there's a bunch of different guys this year in the NBA draft that, have, that star potential power, but none of them were that Zion, that John Morant, that Karl Anthony Towns, that Anthony Davis out of college basketball. And again, partially had to do because that college basketball season wasn't finished, and also just because this whole interview process and combine process has been completely different this year due to obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. So this year and any other year, draft picks are worth maybe not as more as they usually are, specifically the 28th overall pick, going for a guy, Dennis Schroeder, who again, in my opinion, should have won Sixth Man of the Year last year, averaged 20 points per game off the bench. And I think if I'm Frank Vogel and LeBron James, I want him to do that exact same thing for my team. I don't think the Lakers need to inject Dennis Schroeder into the starting lineup. I don't think they need him to be starting, alongside LeBron James in the backcourt potentially. Or maybe LeBron James moves back to his traditional small forward spot and you put Dennis Schroeder as the starting point guard. I don't think any of those things need to happen. I think the starting lineup from last year proved to be working and effective enough for that part of the team to be run back next year. But of course, what do we all say about the Los Angeles Lakers? They have terrible guard play. That's meaning LeBron James isn't a guard, obviously. He does play point guard for the team, but his body isn't built like that. But pretty much perimeter defense and guard play was a real weakness of the Los Angeles Lakers last year. I think Dennis Schroeder gives you an upgrade at both of those things. Definitely from an offensive weapon standpoint and from an offensive point guard standpoint, he's going to be a bigger help than maybe Rondo was last year. But what Dennis Schroeder is going to be able to do as well is defend. I don't know if he's necessarily considered a top 5 point of attack defender in the league or anything like that. But what they do have is, an athletic body to throw around, that perimeter, that three-point line against teams that are going to be, shooting the three-point a lot. They're going to go against teams like Houston, and assuming they still have James Harden, they'll still be shooting the three-point a ton. The Clippers shoot the ball the three-point a ton as well. And, of course, that final team, the Golden State Warriors, who are coming back on the come-up after they potentially take James Wiseman at 2 or whoever they draft. Maybe they trade the pick, and Steph and Klay come back. So you're going to want a guy that's going to be able to guard the three-point line, as the Lakers' competition out west is going to have to do and revolve around three-point shooting. At the end of the day, Dennis Schroeder averaged about 20 points per game plus almost 4.5 assists off the bench of an Oklahoma City team that was a guard-dominant basketball team, right? He was not even the third option as a guard for that team, right? The first option was obviously Chris Paul or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then the other one of those two. And then also Steven Adams needed a lot of his touches as well, and Danilo Gallinari. So at the end of the day, Dennis Schroeder coming off the bench, he might have been option number 1 off the bench, but he wasn't even maybe a top 3 or even top 4 option on that Oklahoma City Thunder team. In my opinion, Dennis Schroeder immediately becomes the third best player on this Los Angeles Lakers team. When you look at it, of course, LeBron James is the best player on the team as the point guard or the small forward or whatever position he's playing. And of course, Anthony Davis is the second best player. And sure, the LA Lakers do have 2 probably top 7 players in the entire league, but we saw them struggle at certain points during the playoffs against teams that had a little bit more depth. I mean, Miami did take them to 6 games, and some of the other teams only took them to 5. But at the end of the day, the Los Angeles Lakers were not going to be able to just run it back with this exact same roster and hope to win another championship next year. Not with the Clippers looking like to get better and potentially Houston finding a new, co-star with James Harden potentially. Brooklyn coming up, Miami obviously looking to improve as well. They've been all around the trade rumors. So the Los Angeles Lakers had to do something, and they weren't going to find that in the draft of the 28th overall pick. So in my opinion, they're getting an absolute steal in Dennis Schroeder to come over from them, from Oklahoma City to Los Angeles. I think if he reprised that same role, that bench scoring guy, Dennis Schroeder's numbers could go up last year just because of pure usage rate, right? Not only is he going to be that main bench guy for the LA Lakers, and I think he could at least get 20, because again, if you look at that bench for the LA Lakers, there were some guys on that bench for Oklahoma City besides Dennis Schroeder that could make some plays and could get some buckets. I look at this Los Angeles Lakers bench, of course now with Rajon Rondo most likely leaving, could go to the Clippers, could go to another team. bringing in Dennis Schroeder, and you say Dennis Schroeder comes out with this bench unit, what is it, Kyle Kuzma? Maybe he's starting next year, right? There's no clear-cut guy on the bench that can give you a bucket anytime you need him to, besides Dennis Schroeder. Again, I think Dennis Schroeder is a top 3, maybe even the best bench player in the entire league at this point, with Lou Williams sort of falling off a little bit at the end of last year, specifically in the bubble. So again, I think Dennis Schroeder's numbers could go up just because of pure usage. Like, we could see Dennis Schroeder average 23 points a game next year, not just because of his bench role, but also he'll probably end up closing games like he did in Oklahoma City, even more so with this Los Angeles Lakers team, because now you get a closing lineup out there potentially of KCP, Kyle Kuzma, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and now Dennis Schroeder. And I think that goes pretty much with any other starting 5 in the league now, specifically a closing 5. And I think that was something that the Lakers maybe had a little bit of cause for concern, specifically with how Brooklyn's looking and maybe even how Milwaukee's looking and how the Clippers are looking, right? And so you can't take any of these teams for granted. And with this league, which is all about transactions and getting better every single year, and I don't think any league changes more by the day than probably the NBA, you have to do something, and you can't just sit there and do nothing and hope that nobody else will improve to your level if you're a championship team. And I think the Lakers went above and beyond with improving their team. The Lakers probably could have added a couple of nice bench guys on the vet minimum and say they improved their team, and they would have. But getting a guy like Dennis Schroeder, improving the third best player in your team, getting not a third star necessarily, but definitely a third good player, a guy who can, make good defenders, still get those buckets late in games, another guy to rely on in the clutch, is huge for LeBron James and Anthony Davis and the entire Los Angeles Lakers team. And I think, in my opinion, no matter what happens here, even if there is some sort of crazy trade, unless Brooklyn lands James Harden, which has been speculated, but I don't know how legit those rumors are that Harden is even going to be traded from Houston, let alone traded all the way to Brooklyn. I think there should be no reason why the Los Angeles Lakers aren't the clear-cut favorites to be the NBA champions next season from a betting perspective, and I expect that trend to continue. But shout out to the Los Angeles Lakers for not just running it back as a championship team. I think too many teams do that. They just bring it back with that same roster, more in the NFL than the NBA, and it doesn't work out for them. In sports, your window isn't as long as you'd like it to be, and that's the case with every single team. Even the greatest dynasties in NBA history, Golden State, only lasted, 4 or 5 years? It's not like these 10, 20-year complete dynasties that maybe we've seen like the New England Patriots have or something like that. So you always got to find ways to improve and capitalize on your championship windows, and that's exactly what the Los Angeles Lakers are doing. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, I want to get into everything Russell Westbrook, sweepstakes, and potentially James Harden as well, and some of these other guys that I think could be potentially huge players in this NBA transaction window. Where do I see some of them going? We'll get into everything NBA rumors, specifically around the trading front and potentially free agency, right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, if you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking about everything Dennis Schroeder trade to the LA Lakers. It's looking like the trade is going to be finalized actually after the draft. So after doing a little bit of research, I realized that they can't trade until after the draft pick has been selected due to the, the Stephen rule, I think is what it's called. So you can't trade draft picks in back-to-back years. The Lakers obviously traded their first-round pick last year for Anthony Davis. They can trade for Dennis Schroeder. It'll just be after Wednesday's draft. The Oklahoma City Thunder will make the pick, and they'll just tell the Los Angeles Lakers who to pick. So whoever is picked by the LA Lakers and wears that Laker hat is actually going to be going to Oklahoma City for the Dennis Schroeder trade, but that cannot be announced until, I think, Wednesday or maybe even Thursday, which is after the NBA draft, of course. But that trade, I should say, is looking just about finalized, and Dennis Schroeder will be a Los Angeles Lakers. And it's also been reported that they're really, really interested in signing Wesley Matthews away from the Milwaukee Bucks to replace Danny Green, who they apparently are trading away to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I expect Danny Green to be bought out and probably sign with a contender just like that. Teams, Miami, Brooklyn, Clippers, immediately thoughts. Any team that needs some more three-point shooting. Milwaukee, a lot of those teams could use a guy like Danny Green. I expect him to be bought out and picked up rather quickly. I want to transition now, stick with the NBA, and talk about some of these other moves and rumors that we are hearing. The NBA trade season starts tomorrow, again, Monday at noon. Trades can be officially announced. The draft is Wednesday, and then I think free agency starts that Friday. So this week, the NBA is really kicking off. I cannot wait to talk everything about NBA when free agency starts, post-draft, who went where, what were the trades, where will Chris Paul land, where will Russell Westbrook land, I'll get to in a second. Is James Harden being moved potentially? Where do guys like Danilo Gallinari and Paul Millsap sign, some really big veterans that could help some of these teams get over the hump into championship level, specifically Danilo Gallinari? Will Victor Oladipo be traded? Will Bradley Beal be traded? So many different rumors and, trades and free agency and articles and videos to watch. The NBA is just the gift that keeps on giving, and while I love watching NBA basketball and I love watching the finals and I love watching my teams play, what I almost like just as much, if not even more, is this rumors and all this, these articles and these videos, and the hope that your team can get even better than it is. I think NBA free agency and trade season brings hope to pretty much every NBA fan and every NBA fan base. It gives them hope that their team could be the one to land the next superstar and build the next super team. And it's a really exciting time for the NBA. Not a lot of negativity in the NBA right now. I do want to talk about some of those guys that I was just referencing on where do I think they will end up landing. Starting off with Russell Westbrook. Now, I wanted to initially lead this show off with the Russell Westbrook trade sweepstakes. Of course, it was reported that he wants out of Houston. He did not like his role, and he did not like the style of basketball they played. Now, honestly, this wasn't the most unpredictable thing in the world. We all questioned, I think pretty much every NBA fan questioned what the fit between Harden and Westbrook would be. I don't want to say it didn't work necessarily. I think they put up numbers and they won a lot of games. They are friends. I think they've been friends since all the way back in high school. Their games just don't mix well, man. They don't. Russell Westbrook is at his best, honestly, if you ran a small ball lineup and surrounded the team with shooters and let Russell Westbrook just operate in the paint, you would not win a championship. But I think Russell Westbrook could return to that MVP form we saw in Oklahoma City and lead your team to the playoffs. And there are a couple of teams that I think that is enough at this point, while everybody is quote unquote competing for championships, that's just not a realistic goal for a lot of teams in the NBA right now. And I think a realistic goal for a lot of teams in the NBA is get back to relevancy and get some fans in the stands. And that's where I think Russell Westbrook comes in, because I think Russell Westbrook could go to a team that maybe has been struggling over the past couple of seasons, maybe even the past 10 years, and turn them into a relevant franchise again, get them back on ESPN, TNT, national television, get more season ticket holders, sell more jerseys, and get you a lower seed in the playoffs and get your fans to watch a couple of playoff games. And for me, that's enough for a certain, degree of NBA teams and certain, NBA fans. Now, what are some of those teams that don't have a chance at winning a championship over the next couple of years, but would like to return to relevancy and probably get some fans in the seats? There's only a couple of teams that make sense for Russell Westbrook, in my opinion. One of them, the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, they have Blake Griffin now, and they were competing when he was completely healthy. I'd love to see Russell Westbrook in Detroit bringing, energy and fandom back to the Detroit Pistons fan base and just, franchise overall. And I think a Russell Westbrook-led Detroit Pistons would get you into the 8th or 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. You wouldn't be able to hang with the big dogs like Brooklyn, Miami, Milwaukee, and Boston. But at that stage, what are you looking for if you're Detroit Piston fans? I think step one before competing for a championship is just making the playoffs. And before making the playoffs, you need to have a superstar. And in the NBA, sometimes you don't always get to pick and choose your superstars. Sure, you'd rather have James Harden or LeBron or AD than Russell Westbrook. But at the end of the day, Russell Westbrook is still a very, very impactful player. And I know he's not the most analytically sound guy or the best shooter. And again, he does not have a proven track record of winning. But what Russell Westbrook will do is put up numbers, try his absolute best, and put some fans in the stands. And I think that's what certain franchises need, including the Detroit Pistons. So if you're the Detroit Pistons, I think you look at a guy like Russell Westbrook, and again, it's not going to cost you a ton. I think the obstacle in acquiring Russell Westbrook isn't how much you're going to have to give up. I don't think the price is very high. I think the only obstacle in the Russell Westbrook trade is, one, the market, because I don't think these teams, like it's been reported, they were saying that potentially the Clippers could be interested in Russell Westbrook. That's bogus. He's not going anywhere. The Clippers want absolutely no part of Russell Westbrook. That's somebody just trying to stir up a market and trying to get their client, maybe it was an agent who leaked it, Russell Westbrook, some more, some teams to be interested in. So I think Detroit is one of those teams that I could see being interested. Another team that I could see being interested is the Charlotte Hornets. He already has the connection with Michael Jordan with that Jordan brand shoe deal. Again, Charlotte just needs to be rejuvenized. The goal is not to win a championship with the Charlotte Hornets right now. But ever since Kemba Walker left, they're missing that face of the franchise. Get Russ in Charlotte, playing for the Hornets, get them into the playoffs. I think, again, a Russell Westbrook-led Charlotte Hornets team, if you get them some shooters, potentially around the perimeter, guys already like Devontae Graham playing, then you have some shooters surrounding Russell Westbrook where you can drive and kick or take it to the lane, show off his athleticism, get fans in the seats, sell some more jerseys, make it as the 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. That is enough at this stage of the year and this stage of the franchise for Charlotte fans to accept, and I think would be happy as a successful season. I think the Orlando Magic is another team I could be interested in with all those same reasons that I mentioned for some of those other teams. Less of the Magic. I think the Magic have more of an unlikely chance of acquiring him than maybe the Pistons or the, do. I really do believe that. But at the end of the day, I think the Pistons would be a great option. And, of course, I think the Magic would be a good option. Again, they have shooters like Fournier, and they're looking to move off a guy like Aaron Gordon. I could see Aaron Gordon being added into a Russell Westbrook trade. Again, I don't think the main obstacle for a team like Charlotte is what I was trying to say, or another team acquiring him, is the compensation. It's more getting that contract. I mean, the money's going to be hard to work. But, again, you could see the Magic throwing a guy like Aaron Gordon, or maybe if the Hornets already have a couple of bad contracts on their roster, they can move him and maybe throw in a pick or two. Nothing crazy. I don't think Charlotte's going to have to give up their top 5 pick or anything like that. But again, Russell Westbrook and Charlotte makes a lot of sense. But the team where I want to see Russell Westbrook go, and a team that I think makes a lot of sense for Russell, is the New York Knicks. Now, hear me out here. The New York Knicks are currently the second best team in their own market, Brooklyn, right? So the New York Knicks brand is not what it used to be. They've been trying over the past couple of years to get a superstar ever since 2010, to play in New York. They had Carmelo Anthony for a couple of years. Nothing huge came out of it. And the Knicks have been irrelevant ever since. Again, they're not even the number one brand in their own, in their own state anymore. The Brooklyn Nets right now are potentially on the verge of adding James Harden, according to some Twitter rumors. They already have KD and Kyrie, and just from a firepower standpoint, from pretty much an everything standpoint, it's a little too far with how it's going to go, in the standings. But what I do believe is adding Russell Westbrook to this New York Knicks team gives the Knicks everything they need right now. Again, that relevancy, they don't need to worry about ticket sales or anything like that, but relevancy, some credit with the fans, and getting back to playing in some playoff basketball. And I think Tom Thibodeau would really appreciate a guy like Russell Westbrook, a guy who plays hard, doesn't take possessions off, and is giving you, his all for 48 minutes, and he'll play 48 minutes too. And I think he's a good veteran as a guy who could, constantly try to win and never trying to throw games, and I think could be a culture setter in New York, because I think that's what New York needs more than anything, a complete change in culture. New York Knicks basketball needs to get back to what it was in the 80s, tough, gritty, physical, and not let this, sort of this glamorous, we're above everybody type of attitude, because the New York Knicks are not above any franchise in the NBA right now. They've been one of the worst run franchises of the past couple of years. They have a new coach this year, again, Tom Thibodeau, new president of basketball operations. Can they get back to relevancy? And I think that should be the number one goal of the New York Knicks right now, is to get back on ESPN TNT and show people and show prospective free agents that the New York Knicks will be playing meaningful basketball at some point, that they won't just be a top 5 pick team every single year, that they can compete at the 7th and 8th seed level in the Eastern Conference, and then some free agents will want to go play for the New York Knicks, maybe not necessarily with Russell Westbrook, but just for the New York Knicks in general. I think Russell Westbrook could do what Jimmy Butler did in Miami with New York in regards to his reputation. There is no chance in hell that Russell Westbrook has the success with New York that Jimmy Butler is currently having and will continue to have with Miami. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that, New York's all of a sudden going to go to the finals in this first year like what Jimmy Butler did. But what Jimmy Butler did with the Miami Heat is completely repair his reputation around the league. Jimmy Butler came into the Miami Heat, right, as a poor teammate. Nobody liked him. He was considered sort of an ass, right? Nobody. He was sort of one of the villains of the NBA. What are we talking about with Russell Westbrook now? Not liked by the media, not liked analytically, been on a couple of different teams now, similar to Jimmy Butler. Now, is Jimmy Butler better than Russell Westbrook? In my opinion, yes. And again, is Russell Westbrook going to have success with his new team, like potentially the New York Knicks, like Jimmy did with the Miami Heat? No, because at the end of the day, the Heat have incredible coach, incredible organization, and a ton of good pieces already around them. The Heat were already had a win-now roster. Jimmy Butler was just added to that. The Knicks don't have that. But in regards to changing their reputation, I think Russell Westbrook could do what Jimmy Butler did. I think Russell Westbrook could start a winning culture in New York, and maybe 5-7 years down the line, when the New York Knicks maybe are competing for a championship with RJ Barrett and maybe some of these other young guys, and maybe Russ is still on the team, but he's just older, or maybe he's moved on back to Oklahoma City, or maybe he's already retired. People will look back on it and say, wow, Russell Westbrook really started that winning culture in Charlotte, in Detroit, in Orlando, or in New York. And I think that's something that Russell Westbrook must appeal to him. And I think he's also going to get the minutes and the stats to get his Hall of Fame, boosted up and maybe win a couple more awards or lead the league in scoring, things like that. I think at the end of the day, it's a win-win. Russell Westbrook and the New York Knicks is what I want to see. Plus, the rivalry of KD and Russ is already big enough. Imagine if they shared the same city too. Knicks-Nets would be must-watch television every single time they play to be on ESPN TNT. How incredible would that be, man? Russ versus KD, Nets versus Knicks. It'd be absolutely incredible stuff. All right, we're going to take another short break. On the other side of this break, I want to give you my top 10 teams in the NFL right now. I want to give you 10 through 1. Who are the best 10 NFL teams? The list now looks completely different than it did at the beginning of the year, and also completely different than it did week 4, the last time I did this, which was a quarter way through the season. We're now halfway through the season. Every single NFL team has at least played 8 games. So I want to give you my top 10 NFL teams right now, heading into week 9 or 10, depending on your team. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, if you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything Russell Westbrook sweepstakes. A couple of the teams, again, that I think could be interested in him include the Orlando Magic, the Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons, but I really want to see Russell Westbrook as a New York Knick. Again, I think he can do what Jimmy Butler did with his reputation over with the Knicks. I think he could start something in New York that maybe won't have immediate impact to his winning success, but for the future of the franchise really could, and I think people could look back on and say, wow, Russell Westbrook started that winning culture in New York. I think it'd be a win-win situation for both of those teams, and I don't think New York would have to give up like that 8th overall pick that they have. I think it would really just be Julius Randle, some cap fillers, and maybe even a second-round pick. I don't even think Russell Westbrook would command a first-round pick. Again, he's not analytically sound, and he just doesn't have that great reputation as a teammate around the entire league, and he's been bouncing around a couple of years now. This is going to be his third team in 3 years. So again, Russell Westbrook is not the hottest commodity in the world right now. Otherwise, all these contenders would be going after him. Again, you don't see teams like the Heat going after him, like the Celtics going after him, like the Clippers going after him, right? There's these rumors just to start up a market, but none of these contending teams are actually going to trade for Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook wants to be a face of a franchise again, and unfortunately, the only franchises he could be a face of are these bad teams right now. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for him going forward. He might just not have to accept the fact that he might actually never win an NBA championship, which would be sad for one of Russell Westbrook, one of the most athletic, most dynamic players of all time. But at the end of the day, there's almost this Allen Iverson, effect to him that he's just not liked, well received by the media and things like that. But again, if he went to New York, I think some good things could happen over there. I want to transition now to the National Football League. Of course, it's week 9 or 10, depending on who you are. I think it's week 10, but there is some of the teams have only played 9 games. Some of the teams also only played 8 games. So I think it's actually week 9 with some of the teams only playing 8 games is how I meant to say it. So we're about halfway through the season. Every team has played at least 8 games. I've done this twice now. I did it at the beginning of the year, my top 10 NFL teams, and I did it a quarter way through the season. We've now reached the halfway point of the season. So I want to give you now my top 10 NFL teams right now. And I want to tell you right now, the list looks completely different than it did at the beginning of the year, and it also looks completely different than it did about a month ago. So let's get right into it. Starting off at number 10. This is probably one of the better, and I'm going to get hate for this, number 10 teams in the NFL going forward. I have the Buffalo Bills. I understand that they're, 7-2. They just smoked the Seattle Seahawks. And I understand a lot of Bills fans think they're a top 5 team in the league, top 7 team in the league. It's hard for me to accept Josh Allen, the quarterback. I understand he's a great guy. I understand he's a great leader, and I understand the city of Buffalo loves him, and I think he's a great kid, and I think he is the face of the Buffalo Bills. And I will admit, up to this point, I have been wrong about Josh Allen this year. He has improved his accuracy, improved his deep ball, and is winning a ton of games. I just need to see it a little bit more. I need to see it against multiple top 10 teams, right? He just beat Seattle. Go beat Arizona today. Then we can start having legitimate conversations about the Bills being true contenders, because their defense comes, is a little bit on and off depending on the matchup. I think Josh Allen's also a little bit on and off, but the Bills on their best day can beat anybody, but the Bills on their worst day struggle against really, really bad teams. They have a huge matchup coming against Arizona. It's a must-win game for Arizona, otherwise they're back to 500. Arizona does not want to be that. They're competing for the number 1 spot right now in the NFC West, the best division in football. They need to beat this Buffalo Bill team, and for the Bills, this is a pretty big game for them too, because Miami's only a game and a half back, and that's a surging Miami Dolphin team. So if Miami wins today and Buffalo loses, Buffalo going into the bye is only a half a game ahead of Miami, and they could be tied by the next time Buffalo plays. So for both of these teams, it's an absolutely huge, huge matchup. It's one of my favorite games of the week, if not my favorite game of the week. I don't know who I have winning. You'll have to find out next segment, but I think Buffalo is still a top 10 team in the league, and I will admit I've been wrong up to this point, and I might continue to be wrong on Josh Allen, but right now I'm still not 100% sold on this Bills team just yet. So coming in at number 10, still a very good team, is this Buffalo Bill team. Coming at number 9, the Arizona Cardinals. This team should be top 5 in the league. They should be number 1 seed in the NFC West right now if it was just an offensive league, but their defense is so poor. They gave up a ton of points and a ton of yardage to a rookie. Tua Tagovailoa, who I love, and I think this Dolphin team is really good, and yes, they are surging, but I think Tua Tagovailoa was a rookie quarterback in his second overall start, and he completely, from start to finish, picked apart this Arizona Cardinals defense. That tells you something. So when Arizona does go against teams with maybe better quarterbacks, Josh Allen like today on Sunday, their defense needs to step it up and try try to be a little bit better. Just give Kyler Murray a chance, man. They gave them a chance last game and they missed the kick. You got to give Kyler Murray a little bit of a better chance than that. Let Kyler Murray win the game for you. He will do that 9 times out of 10. I really do believe that. I think he's already a top 10 quarterback in football, and I think he should be in consideration for Offensive Player of the Year. I don't know if he'll win, MVP, depending on his record. First of all, if the Arizona Cardinals win the NFC West, Kyler Murray should be MVP. Even if they don't, I think he should be considered Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's having a better year than Lamar Jackson had last year, but that's just me. Coming in at number 9 is the Arizona Cardinals. I love everything about Kyler Murray, and I think Cliff Kingsbury is officially going to work as a head coach. I think we've had about a year and a half to kind of see how he is as a head coach. A lot of people had him flaming out by now. I think Cliff Kingsbury will be the Arizona coach for a long time. They got to do and improve better defensively. They just have to. It's absolutely unbelievable. Coming in at number 8, again, on this top 10 NFL teams list heading into week 9, I have the Miami Dolphins. I think the Miami Dolphins are a top 10 team in football right now, folks. Their defense, number 1 scoring defense in the NFL, top 5 defense overall. They are I think they're the definition of a defense that's bend, don't break. They do give up a lot of yards, but they don't give up a lot of touchdowns. And the number 1 thing in the NFL is not giving up touchdowns. If you do not give up a lot of points, you will win a lot of games in this league. And I'd almost rather have a team that gives up less points than less yards, if I'm being completely honest with you. So coming in at number 8 is the Miami Dolphins, mostly because of their defense. I'm also a huge believer in Brian Flores right now. I think he should be winning Coach of the Year at this standpoint. The only other guy I would really consider is maybe Mike Tomlin, depending on how the Pittsburgh Steelers finish off their year. 100% in my opinion, Brian Flores has done the best coaching job in the NFL. He's done the most with less. And this team is surging at the right time. They have an easy schedule the next month of the year. I think they should end up beating the Chargers this Sunday. I'll talk about that more in my next segment. And I think Tua Tagovailoa is going to be in the serious conversation for Rookie of the Year at the end of the day, because while I absolutely love Justin Herbert and absolutely love Joe Burrow, I think Tua Tagovailoa will finish with the best record out of any of the quarterbacks while playing less games. And I think that's really, really important stat for Tua, and I think Tua is going to only be getting better week by week. But if the Tua Tagovailoa that played against Arizona, that willed his team back to win, because let's be real here, the Arizona Cardinals were up a touchdown in the fourth quarter at home with an extra week to prepare because of the bye, and the better quarterback, right, with Kyler Murray, and Tua Tagovailoa wielded that team back to win. He led that touchdown drive, of course, which was absolutely incredible with the 2, make-miss tackles that he had in open space running, showing off that wiggle that some people didn't think he had, and he led that field goal, which ended up being the game-winning drive. He had 10 points in the fourth quarter. Kyler Murray had none. If that is the true Tua Tagovailoa that we are going to see each and every week, I don't want to get too high on Tua. I absolutely love him as a prospect, but I don't know if we're going to see that every single week. But if we do see that ability at least every other week, the Miami Dolphins are a playoff team, and they're a serious threat to win this division with the Bills, because the Dolphins don't need Tua Tagovailoa to play like that to beat a lot of teams in the NFL. They need Tua to play like that to beat MVP Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes, teams like that. But they don't need him to be like that to beat the Jets, to beat the Patriots, to beat some of these other teams. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Dolphins are going forward, but I'm really, really impressed with Tua Tagovailoa, and I think I would take them over the Bills right now. I understand that the Bills won at the beginning of the year, but that was without Tua and without this surging defense. This Miami Dolphin team is completely different than what it was about a month ago. Different play style, different everything, and I think right now, if the Dolphins and Bills faced off this week, I would pick the Miami Dolphins to win, and I'd say almost handily at this point. So coming in at number 8, the Miami Dolphins led by Brian Flores and Tua Tagovailoa and that incredible defense. Coming in at number 7, I have the Seattle Seahawks. I understand they just lost to the Bills. They're a little bit on a slope right now, but at the end of the day, I think Russell Wilson is the second best quarterback in football, only behind Patrick Mahomes, and I think he might be the best all-around football player, period. I think he does the most for his team, and I think he is the most valuable player in the league at this point. I really, really do believe that. Without Russell Wilson, if you replace Russell Wilson with an average quarterback, right, I don't think the Seahawks make the playoffs. I think the Chiefs do. So while I think Mahomes is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson, the Chiefs made the playoffs a ton of years with Alex Smith. If you take Russell Wilson away from that Seattle team, they do not win any games. They seriously do not win any. They win maybe 1 or 2 a year. That's how important Russell Wilson is for that team. I'm not losing faith on the Seahawks. I'm not selling all my stock on them. They are coming in at number 7, though, and I think they sure have been, on the downgrade since the past couple of years. Or past couple of games, but 100% in my opinion, the Seattle Seahawks are still a top 10 team in the league, and I still think they're in that Super Bowl bubble. So coming in at number 7, I have the Russell Wilson-led Seattle Seahawks. Coming in at number 6, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, man. Last time I did this, I think they were number 2, only behind Kansas City. Since then, they've been completely falling off a cliff. They're 6-3 right now. I do expect them to beat Carolina, move to 7-3, but I'm officially declaring right now, you heard it here first, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not Super Bowl contenders. They're not winning. Tom Brady has never won back-to-back road playoff games ever. period, and they're going to be a wild card team this year because they've lost both games to the Saints, so they don't have the tiebreaker, and they probably won't even get to the same record as them. But even if they did, they'd lose the tiebreaker. Tom Brady's never won back-to-back road playoff games his entire career. Tampa Bay Buccaneers will not be going to the Super Bowl this year, assuming they stay as a wild card team. The only chance that the Buccaneers have is if they somehow win the division, but that would mean a huge fall-off by the New Orleans Saints, who I will obviously get to at some point. Coming at number 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. We hate on Lamar Jackson, and trust me, I think his throwing motion is weird, and I don't think he's the best thrower of the football, and he has to get better if they're going to win a Super Bowl. But let's not act like the Ravens are a top 5 team in football. His style works for them, specifically in the regular season, and they win a ton of games. Lamar Jackson, I think, is 15-5 as an NFL starter? Something absolutely crazy like that. That trend's only going to continue. He's going to win a ton of games, and yes, we can nitpick his throwing motion, how he does well throwing the ball downfield, and sure, they might lose a couple of games because of his throwing ability, but at the end of the day, they win way more games than they lose, and they're a top 5 team in football. And they're still in the Super Bowl bubble. If Lamar Jackson can have this resurgence as a thrower, then they are absolutely still in the Super Bowl bubble, in my opinion. All right, coming in at number 5, the Baltimore Ravens. Coming in at number 4, Green Bay, man. I just wish at the deadline they had traded for Will Fuller. If Green Bay had added Will Fuller, another receiver, I think they'd be right up there with the Steelers, Saints, and Chiefs, who I will all get to very, very soon. But the Packers, to me, are a top 4 team in the league. I think they're a step above the Baltimore Ravens from an offensive standpoint, because I think teams have kind of figured out what the Ravens are doing. They still can't figure out Aaron Rodgers, man. He's still one of the best quarterbacks in football. The only thing holding them back is, 1, their run defense. They can't stop anybody. And 2, the receiving core. Devontae Adams is absolutely incredible, but imagine if Aaron Rodgers had him plus Will Fuller. I think the game plan would be completely different, and the Packers would be even better than what they are right now. But in my opinion, I really, really do believe they're still a top 4 team in the league, and I think they're better than the Baltimore Ravens. Green Bay Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur, coming in at number 4. At number 3, the New Orleans Saints, the number 1 seed overall in the NFC right now. They just absolutely smoked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I thought were going into a Super Bowl about a week ago this time. And I think the New Orleans Saints are better than people are giving them credit for it. Drew Brees' arm is not what it used to be. We all know that, but their strategy and their system still fits him to a T, and it's super effective. And their defense has been playing a lot better recently. They have a ton of veteran experience, a ton of championship experience. Wouldn't surprise me if this is the year that Drew Brees finally gets that second Super Bowl again. They've been knocked out and they've choked in the playoffs so many times, and there's no reason for me to believe that will not continue this year. But who knows? Maybe we finally see Drew Brees get that second Super Bowl that he's been desperately searching for ever since, 2011, I want to say, 2012 maybe. So we got to see how that sort of plays out. But the Saints are absolutely a top 3 team in the league. They bumped the Bucs all the way down to 6, in my opinion. That defense is surging, and that offense is elite, specifically when Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are back. And I think Alvin Kamara is a top 3 to top 5 offensive weapon in football, period. All right, now let's get to the top 2 teams. Number 2, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, they're 8-0, and I understand the Chiefs are 7-1. So, of course, Chiefs are the number 1 team, Steelers are number 2. The Chiefs will beat the Steelers 10 out of 10 times, folks. I'm telling you that right now. The Steelers are a great team. They're 8-0, deserve every undefeated record, deserve every win they've gotten so far, but they play to the level of their competition. They will play up if they play a better team. They played up to the level of competition against the Ravens, but they will play down to the level of competition against the Dallas Cowboys, and that's what we saw last week. So they're coming in number 2, and of course, at number 1, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, best offensive weapons in football. There's no reason why people shouldn't believe that they're going to repeat back-to-back. I think they're getting to the Super Bowl next year. Will they win it? That's a different question. It's very hard to repeat Super Bowls in the National Football League. If anybody can do it, it's Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, though, in this absolutely loaded Kansas City Chiefs team and organization overall. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. Those are my top 10 NFL teams, about halfway through this NFL season. I'm going to take one final short break, but on the other side of this final short break, I want to break down each and every NFL game this week and give you my game picks for each and every NFL game this week, both Sunday and Monday games. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today's show. I want to continue my conversation with the NFL, and I do want to give you my game picks for every single NFL game today, Sunday, and tomorrow on Monday, so let's just get right into it. For the first game I want to talk about here is the Buccaneers versus the Panthers. The Buccaneers coming off a huge, humiliating loss to the New Orleans Saints. Where were they? They lost like 31-3 or 31-0. I don't even remember. Something like that. They play a banged-up Carolina Panthers team that is missing Christian McCaffrey again. After coming back last week, he kind of re-aggravated some things, and he's going to be missing this week. I like Tampa Bay to win, and I like Tampa Bay to win big for a couple reasons. Teams that usually get embarrassed on national television usually come out the next week prepared, focused, and really want to win. This is a huge game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They do not want to fall to 6-4. They want to stay on pace with the Saints at 7-3. And for a chance at the division, I don't think they'll get it, but they want to at least stay alive and have a chance at it. I really, really do believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win big today. I don't see a reason why them not to, and I think Tom Brady will have a really, really good game as well. He'll have a big bounce-back game. After one of the worst games of his career, I think he'll bounce back and have one of the better games of the season. I have the Buccaneers probably by about 10. I would say the Buccaneers by more than a touchdown in this game. But, Carolina's a good team offensively, but defensively I don't think they're great, and I like what I'm seeing from Tampa Bay so far. So I'm going to give Tampa Bay the win, I should say, for this game. Now let's get into Houston versus Cleveland. Now this game I think is going to be closer than a lot of people think, but Cleveland does have the bye and does get Chubb back, and I think that gives them an advantage for that. I like Cleveland by between 3 and a touchdown. I think it'll be really, really... I think it'll be a better game than people think. I think Deshaun Watson will put up numbers against this Cleveland defense that's really, really inconsistent. But at the end of the day, I really, really like what I'm seeing out of Cleveland. From an offensive standpoint, I think Baker Mayfield's playing better, and I think getting Nick Chubb back will be absolutely huge for them. And I think Baker's playing for his season still, and the Browns are obviously in the middle of a playoff push. So I would take them over Houston by probably about 4 or 5 points. Now let's get into Jacksonville versus Green Bay. This game will be a blowout, I can tell you from the start of it. I bet the Green Bay Packers win this game by 10+. The Packers are a really, really good team. Jacksonville is not. Jay Luton had a nice week last week against Houston, but now with a whole game worth of game film, Packers defense will be a little bit more prepared. Not a great Packer defense, but I think good enough to stop Jake Luton, and I think 100% the Green Bay Packers will be winning this game, probably by a lot, over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, let's get into some of the other 1 o'clock games. Detroit versus Washington. I like Detroit in that game as well. Washington's a good team. Alex Smith is starting for the first time in over 2 years, but at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with Detroit in this one. Matt Stafford, more experience, have more practice time, and I think the Lions are just a better overall team in general. It's looking like DeAndre Swift is going to be the starting back for them. Interesting to see how he does in his first ever start. He's been playing, obviously, all year, but he hasn't really been the lead feature back. They've been sort of doing it by committee, but I think some people are speculating that today they might actually do it a little bit differently and go full on in regards to the DeAndre Swift train. So I think I would like the Detroit Lions probably by about a field goal. I think it'll be close. Neither of these teams are very, very good, but I like Detroit by about a field goal. All right, let's get into Giants versus Philadelphia. One of my upset picks of the week. I like the New York Giants to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Giants are legitimately in this race. I think the Giants have a really good coach in Joe Judge, and they just get better every single week. Daniel Jones is playing for his job. I think he has a good game, and I like them to beat Philadelphia by a field goal or less. I think it'll be a very, very close game. NFC least matchup. Not going to be a lot of high scoring, not going to be a ton of points. I like New York by about a field goal. And then I think we have to really start considering the New York Giants as contenders in that division. That's what I have going on for the 1 o'clock games. Now let's get on to some of the 4 o'clock games. We've got a ton of 4 o'clock games today. I think there's almost 6 or 7 of them. Let's just get off rapid fire here. Broncos versus Raiders. I think we all know. I think we're going to believe that the Raiders are going to win this game. Denver's a good team, not a great team. Raiders are in the middle of a playoff push. I like the Raiders to beat the Broncos by about a field goal. Then we have Steelers versus Cincinnati. Now, this was almost my upset pick of the week, but I think the Steelers, who do play down to the level of down to the level of competition, will continue to do so. I think this game will be closer than people think. I like Pittsburgh, but only by a field goal. If this game was in Cincinnati, I would have potentially picked Cincinnati to actually win this game outright, but I like Pittsburgh by a field goal, playing down to the level of their competition. Do not bet Pittsburgh to cover, though, in my opinion. All right, now let's move to Seattle versus Rams. I like Seattle to have a big bounce-back week against teams that get embarrassed on national television. I don't know if you consider the Bills game national television, but in a big game, like to respawn and get focused. Seattle should beat the Rams, and Russell Wilson has a really good record when he's not favored. I like the Seahawks to win outright, probably by about a field goal. And then we have some of the other 4 o'clock games. One of my favorite games of the week, Chargers versus Dolphins. I'm going to give this one to the Miami Dolphins. I think Justin Herbert is good. He's missing a lot of players on his offensive line, not to mention Joe
Joey Bosa will also be out. Tua Tagovailoa is getting Kyle Van Noy back. And I think Antonio Callaway is going to be a pretty big player for them. He just got elevated from the practice squad after serving his 8-game suspension. I think the Dolphins should win that game by about a field goal. And then we have my favorite game of the week, Buffalo versus Arizona. Buffalo's a good team. Again, they're a surging team right now, but Arizona, this is a must-win game, and I think they have a lot more to play for than Buffalo does. While Buffalo does have a lot to play for, I think Arizona's playing for something really, really huge here. 5-3 Arizona. I think they will beat Buffalo by a field goal. I think Kyler Murray has an even better game than he did against Miami, and I think Kyler leads the Arizona Cardinals to a playoff victory, and the Bills come back down to earth a little bit here. Then we have Saints 49ers. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think we all know the New Orleans Saints are going to win that game. Ton of injuries for San Francisco. No Jimmy G. Still no Kittle. No reason to believe that they will win that game. I like the Saints by a lot, probably about 10+. And then we have the Sunday night game between the Ravens and the Patriots. Again, New England already doesn't do well against mobile quarterback, let alone maybe the most mobile quarterback in the entire league. I'm going to take Lamar Jackson and the Ravens by about a touchdown over the New England Patriots on Sunday night, which is tonight. And finally, I know it was a little bit of rapid fire here, but the Monday night game between the Minnesota Vikings and Chicago Bears, another upset pick if you want to go through record-wise. I think the Minnesota Vikings, who are surging right now, and the Dalvin Cook-led Minnesota Vikings will beat the Nick Foles-led Chicago Bears by about a field goal. Those are my game picks for this week in the NFL. Let me know what you think, and hopefully in my next episode I'm talking about how many games I predicted right instead of how many games I predicted wrong. Can't wait to talk about that on Tuesday. But that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you again by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, again brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Alex Masfer. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the...
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.